Hey guys, it's Miss Mills here, and I'm going to be teaching you a lesson over main idea. Let's read the agenda for this lesson. First, there's going to be a paragraph that I'm going to read to you that goes along with the pre-test that's in a Google form that's just 3 questions long. This is used so I can tell what you already know about main idea. Next, we're going to read the learning target for this lesson. And then after that, we're going to recap a little bit of your previous knowledge about literature and informational texts, their differences, and then we're going to have an activity about text features. Next, we'll get into the discussion over main idea. Then we'll practice identifying main idea. And then after that, there's going to be a passage over for the post-test, and then there'll be a post-test for you to take. This post-test will show me how well you learned from my lesson. Okay, let's start the lesson. Okay, this says, before you take the pre-test, read this paragraph. So this paragraph is from the book Who Was King Tut by Roberta Edwards. Listen closely. Before Howard Carter found Tut's tomb in 1922, people thought every single tomb of a pharaoh had been opened and robbed. That was why Carter's discovery was such an important event. There always had been legends about the fabulous treasures of the pharaohs. Now there was proof. The legends were true. Here's the link to the Google form. This should also be in your Google Classroom. If you are able to take this, please do so. But if you sometimes have trouble with internet, please do not stress over it. Okay. Let's read the learning target for this lesson. Okay, read along with me. I can determine the main idea of a text and use supporting details from the text to prove my answer. Okay, here's the recap of what should be previous knowledge of literature and information texts. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about literature. Literature is based in fantasy. Can somebody give me another term for fantasy? Something that's not real. Yes, fiction. Most literature is based in fictional settings or in a place that's not real and based on facts that aren't real. Most take place in fictional settings, like I just said, and the characters are not real people. Okay, the example that I'm going to use for this part is Indiana Jones. Is Indiana Jones a real character, a real person? No, he's not a real person. He seems real because he does the work of an archaeologist, but he doesn't exist. Not in the real world. Now, over here, in the informational text column, informational texts are based in facts. Okay, these facts can be proven, they can be read in books, they can be cited by people who have researched them. And they take place in the real world. If you look on a map, you can trace back where this information came from on a map or where it was gotten. Okay, and the characters are or were real people. Just think about anything that you've read about Martin Luther King Jr. It's most likely an autobiography, which is written by a person who is alive, writing about the life of a person who is now deceased or dead. And the example I'm going to use for an informational text is anything written about Howard Carter. Remember the pre-test paragraph? That name was mentioned in it. And Howard Carter really did discover the tomb of King Tut back in 1922. That was a long time ago, and now he is dead, so anybody who's writing about his life is writing an autobiography about him. Okay? Can anybody else think of something that might make them think of something fantastical or fantasy-like that really exists in the real world? Yes, medieval castles. And whenever you think of castles, what do you think of? You think of knights, right? Whenever whenever there's a dragon around, what's usually fighting it in a story? A knight, right? But do dragons exist? No. No, dragons don't exist. So dragons would be based in fantasy, but there really were and still are there really were knights, and there really were and are still castles, medieval castles. Now, here is a short activity that I would like you to do that talks about the text features of informational texts. Over here are 5 terms that I want you to match their descriptions to. The terms are table of contents, title, illustration, chart, graph, or table, and caption. I want you to take a few minutes, work with a shoulder partner, and figure out the definitions that match with these terms. Okay, I'll give you a few minutes. Timer starts now. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of people finishing up. I'll give you another half minute. Alright, let's talk about these. Someone give me the definition that they got for table of contents. Right, it's D. The table of contents is the list of chapters or parts in a book or article. Okay, can somebody give me the definition they got for title? Yep, it's the name of a written work, story, or article. Right, someone give me the definition they got for illustration. Right, it's a drawing in a book or an article. Let's hear the definition for chart, graph, or table. Yes, it represents data gathered from research. Right, and there's only one left for caption. Somebody read it to me. It's the description underneath a photograph. Now let's talk about why we're going back over these. These things, whenever you're reading an informational text, can help you figure out the main idea of that text. If you look at the title, usually of a work, it will help you figure out what that article or that book is mainly about, or what that research paper is about. If you look at illustrations, if you look at all the charts, graphs, or tables that are in the book or the article, that can also help you figure out what the main idea is. Okay, now let's actually define what main idea is. Main idea sums up the major points of a story, passage, or article, and it is supported by details given in the story, passage, or article. And whenever you're looking for it, it can usually be summed up in one sentence, written in your own words. Excuse the noise, that was my cats. Alright, so let's recap that. So it sums up the major points of a story, and it is supported by details given in a story, passage, or article. Now, let's practice. I'm going to ask you to work with the same shoulder buddy that you did for the last activity, and I'm going to read you 2 different paragraphs. These paragraphs are going to contain a main idea and a supporting, These 2 passages are going to help you get practice in at identifying main idea and finding supporting details to support that main idea. It's in the name, supporting details. So I'm going to read one. I'll give you a few minutes and you'll write down what you think the main idea is, and then we will share. You can try to write down some supporting details that you think support that main idea as well, but I'm mainly looking for if you can identify the main idea. Okay. Here's the first passage. Okay, this is an excerpt from Who Was Rosa Parks by Yona Zeldis McDonough. Okay. It's called the Civil Rights Act of 1964, The Civil Rights Act of 1964, signed by President Johnson, was a great milestone in granting equal rights to minorities. It did away with the Jim Crow laws that had enforced segregation in the South for so long. Now all people had the right to be served in public facilities such as restaurants, theaters, libraries, and hotels. A public place could not remain for whites only. If schools did not let in black students, the schools would be taken to court. Companies with more than 15 employees had to treat all workers equally. Then, in 1965, came the equally important National Voting Rights Act. This made it illegal for any states to prevent someone from voting on the basis of color or race. Congress now outlawed the practice of requiring citizens to pass unfair reading or literacy tests in order to register to vote. Now, take a few minutes with your shoulder buddy and try to figure out what the main idea of this passage is. Look for supporting details that supports the main idea that you write down. I'll give you a few minutes starting now. Give you another half minute. Alright, let's talk about this. Can somebody give me what they think the main idea of this passage is? Yes, it's that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a great milestone in granting equal rights to minorities, And what are some supporting details that made you come to that conclusion that that is the main idea? Yes, it's right after the first sentence. It did away with the Jim Crow laws, and that was a big part of that Civil Rights Act being passed. It did away with those laws that enforced segregation. So the main idea was that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a major stepping stone in the fight for minorities' equal rights. And the biggest supporting detail of that is that it did away with the Jim Crow laws that had enforced segregation in the South for so long. But I also added this down here, which was basically right after it. Alright, this next one might be a little bit more tricky. This first one, the main idea was kind of up and in your face because it was in the very first sentence, basically. But this next one is a little bit more trickier. You have to, I wouldn't say dig deeper to find the main idea. You have to put the pieces together to get the main idea in this one. That's the only hint I'm going to give you. So let me read this next one. Right. This is from What is the Declaration of Independence by Michael C. Harris. It's called Pen, Ink, and Parchment. Today, pens are manufactured so cheaply that losing one or having it run out of ink is no big deal. However, in the 1700s, writers made their own pens. They used a quill, one of the large feathers from the wing or tail of a bird. Quills from geese, crows, or swans were commonly used. Thomas Jefferson owned special geese, so he'd never run out of supplies. The tip of the quill was sharpened with a knife to make a pen point, and then the quill was dipped in ink. Ink was made from all kinds of things, like berry juice or even soot from the fireplace. The signers of the Declaration used iron gall ink from melted metal and plants. Important documents weren't written on paper but on parchment, which was made from dried animal skin. The Declaration of Independence on display at the Library of Congress is on parchment. Rich colonists who didn't want to make writing supplies by hand could buy them from a shopkeeper. Traders often sold fancy European quills, ink, and parchment at the local seaports. Okay, I'm going to give you a few minutes. Try to find the main idea of this paragraph with your shoulder partner. Go. Right, I'm seeing people getting done, so I'll give you another half minute. Okay, let's talk about this. Okay, somebody tell me what they got for the main idea of this passage. Yeah, is that pen, ink, and parchment were kind of complicated to make back in the day. Even the first sentence says, today pens are manufactured so cheaply that losing one and having it run out of ink is no big deal. Like if we lost the ballpoint pens in the caddies on our desks, we could just replace them. We could go to the dollar store and buy them. The dollar store, emphasis on dollar, they're very cheap. And they're made cheaply. But back then they had to catch birds and pluck the quills out of them. And it said right there in the middle, Thomas Jefferson owned special geese so he'd never run out of supplies. Remember, he helped write the Declaration of Independence. And what are some supporting details that helped you get to that conclusion? Yeah, one supporting detail you could use was ink was made from all kinds of things like berry juice or even soot from a fireplace. Yeah, that's things that you wouldn't even think about ink being made of today. So people had to actually get it, and if I had to gamble a guess, I would say they ground it up and then they just used it to write with. What's another supporting detail? Yeah, it's the fact that parchment isn't made of paper, although there was paper back then, but parchment was made from dried animal skin. Think about the color of the Declaration of Independence in the movie National Treasure. What color was it? Was it white? No, it wasn't white. What color was it? Yeah, it was sort of yellow. It was sort of a dull yellow. And that's because it's animal skin. I don't know if tanned animal skin is that color. It should be, I think. Okay. That's a very good activity, guys. Okay, thank you for working so diligently. Give yourself a pat on the back. 1, 2. Right. Yes, and here's the main idea. Pens, ink, and parchment were much more complicated to make in the 1700s. And there are the supporting details. You guys got it right on the bat. Now, I'm going to read you a short passage called The Rosetta Stone from the same book that I got the pre-test paragraph from. And then there will be a link to the post-test for you to take following the passage. It's just 3 questions long. It's no big deal. Okay, I'm going to read you the passage now. Remember, the title of this is called The Rosetta Stone. If it weren't for a lucky accident, the meaning of hieroglyphs might still be a mystery. In 1799, French soldiers found a large piece of black stone called basalt. The stone had carvings in 3 different scripts, hieroglyphs, Greek, and a third kind called Demotic. The words on the stone were written in 196 BC to praise a pharaoh named Ptolemy V. All 3 languages were commonly used at the time, so that whoever saw the stone could read it. By the 1800s, no one knew how to read hieroglyphs, but if someone could match up the Greek and the Demotic to the hieroglyphs, they could create a key to hieroglyphs. Jean-Francois Champollion finally figured out the basic rules of hieroglyphs after studying the stone for 14 years. Finally, after almost 1,500 years of silence, the language of ancient Egypt could at last be heard. The stone is called the Rosetta Stone after the town it was found. Today, it is in the British Museum in London, England. Here's the link to the post-test. It's on a Google form. Like I said, it's just 3 questions long. And if you can take it, please do take it. I want to see how good you guys do or what I need to work on in my teaching to better help you learn. Or if you are having trouble with your internet, because sometimes we don't get the best internet where we live, do not stress about this. Okay? Right. Thank you guys so much for listening to my lesson. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Okay? Thank you.